Hello everyone. So in this video we will going to learn about OAuth 2.0. So here we will first going to learn why we need it actually. So let me explain you. So I am just ignore this authorization code and PKCE all these things. So just understand the scenario like in microservices. So we will going to have a different microservices, right? So here just assume we have a one microservices related to the product and we have another microservices related to the order, right? In a similar way we will going to have a notification service and other services, right? So whenever we will going to communicate with these microservices, right, we need to authenticate the users. So how we will going to authenticate the users? So if you are completely coming from a monolithic mindset, right? So in monolithic application we used to have authentication providers in every monolithic applications, right? So in every monolithic applications we have a full-fledged authentications, right? But here if you see, we will going to have so many microservices. It totally going to depends on the product to product. So generally we will going to have a 3 4 5 microservices. If we have a 1 and 2 microservices, then there is no need to split the monolithic applications into the microservices, right? So just assume if we have like a 4 5 microservices, so it will not going to make any sense to add that authentication providers and writing each and everything spring security in every microservices, right? So it will going to introduce so many problems if we go in this way, right? So there must be some centralized way through that we can ensure the authentications for these microservices, right? For resolving this same problem we have a OAuth 2. OAuth 2 has other benefit also, but this is the most I would say like a most uh, something which OAuth is only provide. So here if you see right, so we will going to have a one authorization server. So this authorization servers will going to handle everything related to the authentications, right? Who will everything related to the authentications, right? Who which users has which permissions, roles, and what type of applications we have, client applications, right? We have a public applications and we have some server applications. Everything this authorization servers will going to be handled, right? So how this authorization server will going to be ensure? So ensure the security for these microservices. So just assume if users comes, right? If user will going to open our some public faced applications, just assume we have some React app, right? So which is hosted on some URL and user will going to open that applications, right? So once we user open that application, so for displaying the data to the users, our front end application will going to hit some endpoint to the microservices, right? And maybe we will going to have a BFF also. Just ignore those BFF concept for now. So our front end will going to communicate with the backend services. So now backend services, how backend services will going to be authenticate? So here just follow me this scenario, right? So our front end applications will going to hit one endpoint to this authorization server, right? So there is so many flow. I'm just explaining a very layman language, very in simple language, right? In later point of a time we will see what type of authentication type grant type we have and what are all the way of authentication flow. Just understand the simple flow here. So when user will going to hit this authorization server, right, our applications, so this authorization server will going to provide us some access token, JWT token. You can just understand these things, right? So our client application will going to get the JWT token from authorization server, right? How our client application will going to get the JWT token, this is a separate story. Just think like that. We will at the client side we will going to get the JWT token from the authorization server. Once we have a authorization token, right, with that authorization token we will going to hit these resource APIs, right? So now we have another problem. This product service will going to receive authorization token here, right? So here we will going to have a JWT token at this service level, right? So how this service will going to validate this JWT token? Is it a valid JWT tokens? Is it the same JWT token which is issued by our authorization server, or maybe it or is it belongs to some authorization server? How our resource how our resource server will going to validate this JWT tokens, right? For that, just think like that. We have a one concept, private key and public key. We already know this concept from the college times, right? In cryptography, we have a concept of a private key and public key. So we know that when we generate the pair of a key, private key and public key, right? If I encode some data by using the private key, so that data will only be decoded by using the public key or the private key. There is a no other way through which we can decode that data, right? If we are using a very good algorithm, right? So just think like that. This server will going to generate a private key, right? So this server will going to have a private key and public key, right? So whenever this server will going to receive a token request, so this server, after validating, performing all the stuff whatever it is, right? So this servers will going to generate a one access token, and this server will going to sign that access token by using the private key, right? And this server will going to be return that access tokens to the client application. Once client application receive that access token, so client application will going to utilize that access tokens to access the resource from the our microservices. So this client application will going to send that access tokens to our resource, right? So now what this resource servers will do, this resource server will going to hit on this authorization server for the public key. So this resource server will going to ask to this authorization servers, hey, I need a public key. So this authorization server will going to return the public key to this resource server, right? So once this resource server receive this public key, right? So with the help of public key, this resource server will going to be verified at JWT token. Is it a valid JWT token or not? If this resource server is able to verify by using the public key, it means this JWT token must be signed with the private key. Otherwise, this resource server will not able to verify by using the public key if it is not signed by the corresponding private key, right? So through this mechanism our resource server will able to validate. So now maybe now in your mind you will going to have some questions. Are we going to have a one combination private key and corresponding public key for every client applications, or it will going to be separate for every clients, right? Or maybe after some interval of a time authorization server will going to regenerate this private key and public key, some rotation will going to be happen on authorization server. How our resource server will going to be get to know when to update this public key, right? There is a many way. So whenever this resource server will ask for the public key, right? And this resource servers, just think like that, this resource server is expose a one public endpoint through which this resource server will going to get that public key. So every public key will going to have a public key ID, right? Every key will going to have a key ID, right? So whenever this resource server will receive a access token, after decoding that access token, right, every access token will have a KID field. That KID field will tell this resource server which key is used for encrypting this, for signing this token, right? The corresponding key our resource server will going to be used. If this key is not present at our resource server side, we can ask from the authorization server for the same key, right? This is the flow how we will going to authenticate, right? So I hope it's clear in your mind. So this is in a simple language we understand. Yeah, this is how we will going to perform the authorizations and authentications, right? Sorry, just remove this authorization. Just this is how we will going to authenticate our applications. So now let's create a Spring Boot OAuth applications authorization servers, and we will see the same flow. And when we have a when we generate the application, when we did the simple config things, right? After that we will see what is authorization code, what is PKCE, what is proof key enhancement, right? What is client credentials, when to use, what is refresh token, right? We will going to see these type, and I will really encourage you to visit to this page and you can read more about these flows, right? So just open this Spring initializer and select this Gradle. We will going to use the Java, right? Or demo. We will going to have this thing packaging jar, and we will going to use the 17 Java. And here let's add the dependency of a Spring Web, and we will also going to add the dependency of a Spring sorry, not Spring Security, OAuth authorization server. These two dependency we need, and after that let's generate the projects. And now you need to open these projects in your favorite ID. So let's wait for this to complete. So now it's completed. So now if you see inside the src, right, and if we open this build.gradle, so we have only these three dependency. One is the test dependency, one is the web, and second is the OAuth, right? So now let's do inside the demo, let's create one package, name it config. Inside this config package we will going to create one class, name this is a security config, right? So inside this class we will going to write our all the configurations. So let's annotate this class with the configuration annotation. And also let's enable web security. Yeah. So now first bean we will going to create a security filter chain. Let's create a security filter chain, name this as a web filter chain for OAuth, right? And it will going to receive a HTTP security. Yeah, this is all. And let's annotate this with a bean. And one more things also, we also need to add this order one, because we will going to add another security filter chains bean. So here inside this bean we will only going to add the configuration related to the OAuth. So let's do one thing. So let's import o OAuth2 authorization server configurer, OAuth2 authorization server configuration. Yeah, this one dot, we will going to have a apply default security function. Here we just need to pass our HTTP security, so it will going to apply the default configurations to this HTTP security. After that we need to do one thing, HTTP security dot get configurer, and here we need to pass our the same OAuth to configurer class. Yeah, these things. And after that we will going to have a OIDC, and here we need to enable this OIDC, otherwise it will not going to be work. So we will going to use the default configuration. So let's start with a baby step. We will going to have everything related to the default only, and after that we need to assign, we need to override this exceptional handling. So let's do that. A dot authentication entry point, and here we can define our login page. So here we will going to use login URL authentication entry points, and it will going to be the default one, which is /login. And after that this is all. Yeah, we can also enable the OAuth resource server for fetching the user informations, but I will do that in a later point of a time. So here let's return the object of this HTTP security. This is all we need to do. The second being for the security filter chain we need to create, which will going to be related to related to the application level of a security only. So let's define HTTP filter chain. So it will going to be app security, and it will again HTTP security, right? If it is looking confusing or like a, just bear with me when you see everything in working state, right? So at that time I will explain you more about each and everything, right? And you are also free to read more about the same thing. So here let's define this HTTP security authorization request. So every request will going to be authenticated. Okay, so request dot any request dot authenticated, this is all. And after that let's enable this form login. So what is this form login, right? I will explain you why we are going with the form login. So let's add this exception, and also let's return http.build. This is all here we need to do. Let's annotate the same with the bean, and it will going to be lower precedence from the OAuth to 1. It will going to be order 2, right? And after defining this, we need to define the users detail. So it is just related to our old Spring security framework. We need to define a users details, password encoders, and all these things. So let's define users detail. So with the help of a users detail, we can fetch the data from our database, right? So if you see, it is just an interface. We just need to implement this interface, and by just providing implementation to load users by users name, you will able to fetch the data from the database, and you just need to return this user detail. So which is again a security related user detail. This is all this is all you need to satisfy, right? So this is all. So here we will not going to use like any database connection. We will going to start with a very simple. Let's import this users dot with users, and here let's define a users amol, and here we will going to have a password will going to be password, and after that we need to define the authorities. So let's define a read, and after that let's create this user. It will going to create the user detail instance, right? I already show you by opening this user detail service, and here we need to return the in memory user detail manager. Yeah, this is all we need to do. And let's annotate this with a bean, and you can easily integrate this with a database just by creating a repository by just implementing this interface. And you just need to create a security user details, and it is already mentioned everything what you need to define inside that user details. It's a very simple, right? So here we have password directly, right? So we need to provide the bean for our password encoder also. Otherwise for every request our encoder will going to be encode the password, so that will going to be fail, right? So here, from here we can return a no ops, sorry, no ops password dot get instance. So please remember this. This is only for the dev. Okay, don't use same in production, right? There is always the guidelines what is the best practice for storing the passwords after encoding the passwords, and how to store the salt and all this. It's a separate story, let's ignore that for now. But here I am just adding this thing. Please don't use this type of thing in production, right? We will going to use the actual password encoder. So if you open this, so there is so many password encoder, so you can use the bcrypt password encoder, right? And you can read more about these things, and even you can also implement your own if you want to. In generally we don't do that. And after that's like the way how we have defined user detail services, the similar way we need to define the client, right? So if you recall, right, so if you recall these things, right, so this is the client app, right? React applications, which is the public applications, right? We need to define this client also at the authorizations, authorization server side, what type of client we have, what type of authentication this flow this client will going to be follow, and what will be the ID and secret for this client. Everything we can do that, right? So let's define this clients here. So we have a registered client repository, yeah, this one. So now if you see this, right, so if you want to integrate with the database, it's a very straightforward. You just need to implement this interface and you just need to provide the definition for these things, right? It's a very straightforward. So I am just going to use the in memory implementation. So let's define a registered client, register client. So here let's generate any random UID. So this will be the UID, and after that we need to define a client ID. So let's define this as a public hyphen client. Okay, this is our React app. Okay, this is our public faced client. So here we can have a client secret. So let's define this as a secret. It should not be secret, it should be must a very it should come from a environment variable. It should be like a secure things, right? We should store in an actual environment, we store this thing in a secret manager or something. We never pass like this. Okay, please make sure this thing store in secret manager. Okay, I'm just adding these comments in case. Yeah, and after that we need to define a scope. So scope is just like roles. So if we see the specification of the OAuth2, right, it just tells about the scope. It does not tells about the roles and some things, even though we can add that, but specification only tells about the scopes only, not the roles or something like that. Okay, so we will going to have a one scope open ID, one is the profile, right? So generally what will be the meaning of these scopes we need to define in our applications, right? So we will going to have a redirect URI. So what is this redirect URI and why we need it? I will explain you these things to later. So if you see this flow, right, so when we hit this authorization servers, right, maybe I will explain this later at the actual time, because if I try to explain now it will going to be confusing. So here let's define some URL. So you can use localhost also, but sometimes it's create a problem with the localhost. So let's use this. So we will going to have a some endpoint 8083. This is the port, right, on which our front end application will going to be run, because this is the port on which this resource server will going to be talk with our front end applications for passing the code, right? And here we can define slash login. I am just adding these things. It's like a totally optional, up to you. After that's code, and this is our application name. This is the format we can follow. And after that we need to define authentication method. What is the authentication methods and all these things, I will explain these things later. So for now we will going to have authentication methods to the none. Keep this very simple. Okay, and after that we need to define authorizations grant type. So what is the authorizations grant type? So we will see these things also later. Grant type. Okay, so let's add grant types dot add. Yeah, so here let's add authorizations code, right? And seconds we need refresh refresh token. right? This is all. Later point of a time we will going to add a client credentials also, but for now keep this as it is. And after that we need to define client settings, right? So here let's define client settings dot builder. So here we only just going to define is the required proof of key is true. So in case like when we going to generate access token, at that time if we fail to pass like code challenge and verifier, so it will going to give us the problem related to that. That will be more readable actually. So let's create a in-memory register repository, and here we need to pass our register client. So this is the client we have created. If we want to store this data in a database, we will able to do that. We can fetch this from the database also. And after that we need to define authorization server setting. Authorization server setting generally will going to be related to the endpoints, what type of endpoints, and if we want to override the defaults endpoints, we can do that with the help of authorization server settings. So we will going to use as it is, we will not going to overwrite anything. So let's annotate this with a bean. So if you open this authorization server settings, right, if you scroll down, so these are the defaults endpoints we will going to use as it is. We will not going to overwrite anything. So let's use that. Let's call this builder.build directly, no need to pass anything, right? In case you want to overwrite, you can do that. And after that you need to define a private and public key. So if you remember, right, so how our authorization server side we will going to have a private key and public key, right? With the help of private key our authorization servers will going to sign the token, right? With the public key our resource server will going to verify this token is signed with a private key or not, it's a valid token or not, right? So now we need to generate the same our uh, key pairs, right? So let's create a Veen for the JWKS resources, and here we need to pass a security context. Yeah. So here first things we will going to generate the key. So let's use key pair generator. Okay, key pair generator. So key pair generator dot get instance, and here we need to pass the algorithm will going to be RSA we will going to use. So let's implement this exception. Yeah, add this exception, and after that we will going to have a key pair generators, sorry, key pair generator. We need to call this initialize, and here we need to pass the size of a key. It will going to be 8048. And after that let's create a keys. Okay, so key pair generators dot generate key pair, it will going to generate the key pair. So let's extract out public key and private key. So here we will going to use a key dot get public key, and let's convert this inside a RSA public key. Yeah, and after that we will going to use a private key. It will also going to keys dot get private key. Yeah, and after creating this public key and private key, one things here you need to remember, right? Okay, so uh, for this learning purpose, here we are creating this every time, right? Whenever this application will going to be run, we will going to create this thing, but this is not the way we will going to handle in a production, right? This public key and private key must be created outside, right? And these things need to be passed as a environment variables, right? These things need to be stored inside a secret manager or something by converting to the base 64, something like that, right? So for now this is how we will going to create it. So RSA key, so let's generate this RSA key dot sorry, RSA key dot, let's let's remove this imports and let's try again. So it will going to be RSA key dot builder. Yeah, so here we need to pass our public key. So if you want to see from where it is coming RSA key, yeah, so it is coming from a Nimbus STS Josh. Okay, so here we need to pass our public key, and after that let's call this private key, and here we need to pass our private key, and after that let's generate a key id uid dot random id dot toString. Okay, and let's call this build. So now we have created our RSA key. So now we need to create a JWT set, JWKS set, yeah, sorry, JWKS sets, and here we need to pass our RSA key. This is all, and let's return a new immutable JWKS set, and here we need to pass our set. So this is all we need to do related to this private key and public key, and here we are generating every time, but this is not the best practices. We should store these things outside, and we need to consume through the help of environment variables only, right? And one more things also, this will be the last thing, JWT decoder we need to implement. It seems like we are just creating a bean and bean. Just bear with me. I will explain you the things in detail when we have a something to show you. So this is all, and it's very simple like this. Maybe it is looking like a very difficult in starting, but when you spend some a little bit more time on this thing, so it will going to be feel like a very simple. It will not like a very tough thing, right? Yeah, so this is all we need to do, right? So now let's start our server and we will see. So it is started, so we will going to open the postman, right? So inside the postman, let's create let's first URL we will going to be hit http colon slash slash, and it will going to be localhost colon 80 slash, and first endpoint we will going to hit OAuth2 slash authorize, or maybe like let's hit the first endpoint to the OAuth2 slash token, right? And it will going to be the type of a post call. So when we going to hit this endpoints, right, so we need to pass some information here. So what the informations we need to pass for generating the token? So this is the endpoint for generating the token, right? It will going to be that call of type of a post call, right? And here we need to pass first things like a grant type. So this is the grant type which we have defined here. If you go inside the client registered client definitions, right, so these are the grant type we have defined, right? So here we have defined only authorization code and refresh code, right? Let's add one more also, because it's straightforward to generate with that client credential, right? Let's add this also, client credential, and now start the application. And one more things also here, let's try out, we will add these things later if it is not work. So here we need to define this grant type, and this grant type will going to be, we will going to use these things, client credential first things. Let's copy this client credential, okay, paste it here, client credential, and here we need to pass the client underscore id. So if you go here, so this is the client id, let's copy this, right, and here paste it, and after that we need to pass a client secret. So if you see, this is the client secret. Here you can pass like this, and after that I think this is all we need to pass for generating access token for the client only. If I hit this endpoint, oh, local host, yeah, so now let's hit this. So it's saying a invalid client. Okay, we also need to define a redirect underscore URI, and if I copy from here, this is the URI, yeah, and now if I hit this endpoint, so it is again saying this invalid client. Let's stop this server. So here we have added this let's add this yeah, client secret basic, right? So now let's start the server. So now if I hit this endpoint, it's again saying invalid. Just 1 minute. This one if we use, let's start. If it is failed this time, we will going to enable the tracing. So let's hit this, yeah. So now if you see, we will able to generate the access token. So now one things we have learned, right? So by using this information, client ID and client secret, we have not used anything related to the user, right? So by using this informations, right, so we need to have this enable client secret post, right? If this client authentication method is enabled, then we will able to use this flow, right? Client credentials. So now let's do one thing. So apart from this client credential, this is how we will able to generate. So now let's see, this client credential is good. So when we have a client application which is secure, like a backend application or something, right? Backend application is issuing the request to another microservices, two microservices are talking to each other. So in that case is good, because that backend services can easily store access token in a very good environment. And also this client secret, for generating this access token we need a client secret. This is very confidential informations, right? On backend side we will able to store this informations, but on the front end side we will not able to store client secret, right? Because on React applications, Angular application, whatever the framework library you are using, on the front end side you will not able to store client secret securely, right? So how we will going to generate the access token on the client side, right? So we will going to use the Pixie flow with the help of a authorization code. First I will show you the flow, then I will explain you. That will going to be more clear to you, right? For enabling that flow, we need to set this client authentication none. When we set this client's authentication none, right, we have a multiple time, it means a public client, right? When we have a public client, for that we need to set this none. If we are supporting a public client, right? Public client means React applications, Angular application, which will going to run on some environment where it is like insecure for storing the client secret or something, right? We need to enable this none, right? So now let's start our applications and I will show you. So now let's create a get request, and URL will going to be http slash localhost colon 8080 slash OAuth2 slash authorize. This will be the URL, and this request will going to be the type of a get, right? It's a sorry, authorize, right? So now inside the param we need to define a few information. First is the client ID, for which client ID will going to be defined that it will going to help to recognize the client, it is a public, and what config need to apply for this client, right? And second, we need to pass this response type. Okay, this response type will going to be code. And what is this code? Okay, it's the authorization code. I will explain you what is this code, right? Just keep this as it is. Here we need to define the scope. If you remember, here we have passed like a OIDC scopes, right? These two scope we are supporting for this application. We can use these scopes only. So for now, here let's define is OpenID only. Okay, and after the scopes we need to define a redirect URI. And what is the use of redirect URI? You was not able to see here, but here you will able to see why we are using this redirect UI. Let's copy this URL and paste it here. Please remember, this should match exactly whatever we have defined here, right? Sorry. So now we need to define a code challenge, right? Code challenge. And what is this code challenge, right? And code challenge method. Okay, so what is this code challenge? What is this code challenge method, right? So you can easily generate this code challenge and this code challenge method, right? I am just going to show you. Yeah, so we will going to use this applications, right? So by just clicking on this generate new, you just need to open this URL, right? You will able to generate code verifier and code challenge, right? So first we let's copy this code challenge, right? And if you want to read about this code challenge and code verifier, right, I will show you. There is a very good OAuth to wrote a one blog where they have give the sample of a code for the Java application, how to generate this code challenge and corresponding code verifier, right? It's pretty easy. And if you see here, we are using code challenge method is SHA256. This is the only method which is currently supported by the OAuth2 currently. Let's copy this code challenge method, code challenge code, and here we need to pass this. And method is S256. This is the method we have used to generate this code challenge and corresponding code verifier. This is all we need to pass here, right? So now let's copy this URL. You cannot hit this endpoint here, right? Because it will going to be redirect. So let's open this, and here you need to hit this URL. So now if you see, when we hit this URL, it's just navigate to us 8080 slash login page, right? Who is serving this login page? It is coming from our authorization server, right? So authorization server just get that information what we have passed and give this page, right? It just like we pass some information authorization server stored that information whatever we have passed like a code challenge, like a code challenge something, right? And code challenge method we have passed, right? And all this authorization server will going to store at their end, and here we need to pass the user, right? So if you open the application, so here if you see we have a users Amols and password is password. So let's pass this information, Amol, right, and password. And if I click on this sign in, so now if you see, it's navigate us to this endpoints, right? 8083, right? So this is the our redirect URI, right? If you see here, this is our redirect URI. So now if you see, so now if you see, let's copy this URL, right? Let's copy this complete code, right? So now If I paste it here, so now if you see, it just redirect to on this callback. So we need to implement this URL on front end side if we want to receive this code. Okay, so this is the code. We need to copy this code. Let's copy this. Okay, so we copy this code. So this is the response type code means, so this code is known as like authorization code, right? With the help of this code we will able to generate the access token. So now if you see, this is the half step, right? We are able to generate the code. So now we need to hit the another endpoint. So this is the, we need to hit the another endpoint. So request will going to be type of a post. Okay, and URL will going to be http:/localhost colon 8080 slash OAuth2 slash token. Okay, so this is the endpoints we need to hit. So we need to pass some params. So first params we need to pass is the grant type. Okay, so here first param we need to pass like a grant type. So it will going to be authorization code. Okay, so we are just using PKCE enhance authorization code. Okay, so if you see, this is the authorization code. If you open our application, client application, so we have enabled this authorization code. Okay, it should be enables, otherwise it will not going to pass, it will going to give us the error. And here we need to pass the client ID. Okay, so here we need to pass code also, and I am just copying this code. This is the code we receive as the part of a redirect. Okay, and client ID, this is the client ID, I am just copying. Okay, paste it here, and after that we need to pass redirect URI. So I am just copying this redirect URI also, and the value of this redirect URI. Okay, paste it here, and after that we also need to pass one more field, code verifier. Yeah, please make sure spelling is correct, right? So we need to pass code verifier. So now if you remember, when we generate this, okay, code challenge, so at that time we have this code verifier also, right, corresponding to this code challenge, right? So now we need to pass this information. So with this informations, our backend authorization server will going to be ensure whoever is passed the user's name and password, right, the same user is passing this code verifier. If someone intercepted in between, they will not going to have this code verifier. This is the alternate way for just not to using the secret, right? We can use this way. So here we need to pass this code verifier on the public. This will be the flow for the public application. So now after passing this code verifier, we need to hit this endpoint. So now if you see, we are able to get this information. So if you see here, we have a access token, we have a scope, ID token, and token type, right? So there is no refresh token. So as of now, for today, for the public applications, authorization Spring Boot server does not support any refresh token or something, right? It is only support for the client credentials. So if we pass the client credential, if we use the PKCE enhance client credential flow, right, something else, in that case it will only going to give us the refresh token. So you can read more about that on Spring side. They just give us the regions ki, on client side there is a no way for storing a refresh token securely. This is the way, but in future they will going to give us, because key clocks and octa everyone give us, right? Because it is not make sense like after every 5 minutes we ask users to again pass the credentials, right? So this is the access token we got. So now we need to go to jw.io. So here let's remove this and paste it here. So now if you see, this is the KID, right? So by using this KID, right, so our authorization servers encrypt this servers, so we can use the public key for the KID at the authorization server side, and we will able to verify this token. So now if you see, this is the informations they have encoded. So this is the scope, and this is the user's name, and this will be the expiration time for this, right? So now you can understand this is how it passes the authorization access token, right? So now let's see this flow. So now if you recall this flow, right? So this is the diagram I just created. So if you recall this, so user will going to open our client applications. So just think like a postman act as the client application for us. So first step, this client application will going to hit this endpoint OAuth to authorize. When this application going to hit this endpoint, this client application also going to tell the redirect URI to this authorization servers. Whenever this authorization server need to pass something to client applications, they need to redirect to that redirect URI, right? So first step, we will going to hit this endpoint, and the response of uh, this authorization call, this authorization server will going to present its own page, login page, right? This login page is coming from where? Authorization server. So now user need to pass the credentials on this page, right? So this is page which is coming from our authorization server, right? It is not coming from our client application. Client application does not know anything about the username and password, right? Client application does not have any clue about this login page, right? It is coming from the authorization server. User need to pass username and password, right? So after submitting this form, it will again going to come to the authorization server. So authorization server going to validate username and password, and now authorization code will going to generate the code. Okay, authorization code. So that code, how this authorization server will going to share that code to the client application already shared the redirect URI, right? So authorization server will going to hit that redirect URI and will going to pass code as the query params. So this is the step. With this step, authorization server will going to share the code, authorization code with the client applications. Now client application got that authorization code, right? So now our client application need to tell us which flow our client application will going to be used. Our client application now also validate it's the same client who generate the authorization code. How this client application will going to validate? By passing the code verifier. Because if you see this combination, code challenge and code verifier, it's related to each other like a private key and public key, right? So whatever code challenge we have passes, it only going to verify by the value we will going to pass code verifier, right? So now now at the part of this at the part of this fourth step, when our client application will going to generate the token, our client application will going to pass the code verifier, and with the help of this, after hitting this, authorization server will going to give us the access token. So now our application got the access token. This is the access token which is valid for the 5 minute, right? So now with this access token, our application will able to communicate with the resource server. So when this resource server receive this access token, right? So they will going to get this information. Yeah, this is the KID. So with this KID, right, they can fetch the information from the server. How they will going to fetch, I will tell you. So now if you see, okay, so let's do one thing. Let's go here. So let's open this authorization server setting, and now if you see like a, so let's copy this endpoints. So now if we go here, so let's hit HTTP. Yeah, this is the endpoint, right? So if we hit this endpoint, so if you see here, our authorization server share these keys, right? So if you see here, this is the key ID 5995V. So now if we go here, so this is same 5995B. So by hitting this endpoints, right, our server will going to get this JWKS, the key pairs, right? And few more things also. There is another endpoint. This is the well-known dot well-known slash openid configuration. If you hit this endpoint, so this is the information it will going to provide, all the informations, right? What type of authorization code and all these things our server supports. And this is the introspection endpoint. With the help of this, we can revoke the access to our access token, JWKS, and all these things. You can just have a look on this endpoints also. So this is all related to the authorization servers. In the next video, I will going to share how we will going to use this access tokens to authenticate corresponding to our resource servers. So as of now, if you see in our diagram, we have seen these things, right? So now we will going to see in the next video how our client application will going to get data from the resource server. And also in futures, I will going to implement this client application also. Whatever we did with the Postman, we will going to automate each and everything. I hope you like this. Thank you.